Imagine not being able to read the paper because your hands were shaking. Imagine not being able to read newsprint as your world faded to black. The National Federation of the Blind, Newsline, Indiana. With your host, Lee Martin, and co-host, Florence Myers-McSwine.
We want to welcome everyone back once again, and we're here once again with Dr. Maurer and Mrs. Patricia Maurer. We left out talking about the vehicles that the blind can drive. Dr. Maurer was studying wanted to be an engineer. He became a lawyer, and he became the leader of the National Federation of the Blind, primarily the voice of the nation's blind. We want to thank you for your services, Dr. Maurer, and all that you do. So I know one thing that we wanted to talk about, and what I know the audience is probably itching to ask a few questions. So let's begin. Let's get a few questions in.
Well, becoming a lawyer has lots of advantages to it because it is a legal degree is an entry card into hundreds of different professions, and you have credentials of a kind that you can use in many, many different ways. Number one, you get the idea that you could make yourself some decent money if you got to be a lawyer. Some lawyers do, more than some even, quite a few do. Some don't, but most do. But beyond that, the idea that I had in mind was that we find a way to make it practical to have a legal system that recognized the rights of people who are disabled more than it did when I started. I thought there was a way for us to change the United States, and if we changed the United States, then we could change other parts of the world as well. And it has worked out that way. We talked to some people back in 2004 about how it would be if we could share books from one country to another. And we didn't know whether that was very important because we have a lot of books in the United States. We were talking about Braille books and recorded books and things like that, except that some of the people who wanted to study languages here in the United States, we don't have enough books for them. So we need Spanish books and French books and, I don't know, maybe other books in other languages as well. We started working on this in about 2009 in the Obama administration, and we were told by the people in the Commerce Department that nobody ever gets a treaty passed in less than 20 years. If they do ever, some treaties that were recommended to be adopted by the United States in the 1950s still have not been adopted, and they said, you can't do this. Well, a lot of times people tell us we can't do things, and sometimes they're wrong. So we went to Geneva and talked to the United Nations World Intellectual Property Organization over there and persuaded them that this was a good idea, and we worked on a program to put an international treaty together, and we went to a diplomatic conference that occurred in Marrakesh, and then we got the United Nations to adopt a treaty. And then this happened in 2013. So it was 5, maybe 6 years from the time we started. And then we had to start thinking about how do you get the United States to adopt it? Because the United States has to have the Senate adopt it. If the president signs it, the Senate still has to agree by a 2/3 vote. And who ever heard of a 2/3 vote in the Senate of the United States in these days? So we started working on this. And then you have to get a bill through Congress that says that we're going to change our law to meet the requirements of the treaty, because you can't have a treaty without a law to implement it in the United States. So you've got to get both the Senate and the House of Representatives to pass it and the President to sign it. The short story, the President signed it yesterday.
Yeah. Dr. Maurer, another success that we had here recently is space available for veterans. You know, just expound on that a little bit.
Yes, Space A is the program that permits people who are in the military, who are retired and want to fly from one place to another. They can fly on planes operated by the military if there's space available. And we wanted to get people who had suffered permanent and total disability in the service. They're not retired usually because they haven't served long enough to get to the retirement place. We wanted people who had received total and permanent disability to be able to use the Space A program so that they could travel from place to place on military aircraft when those spaces were not used by somebody else. And we got that adopted this year as well. So some people say you can't get things out of the Congress. We've gotten 2 this year.
Yeah. Question in the audience.
There are 2 things that I wish I'd gotten done before I ceased in the presidency of the National Federation of the Blind, and the adoption of the law that eliminates sub-minimum wage is one of them. I have wanted to do that since the 1970s. I think that the sub-minimum wage law that permits people with disabilities to receive less than the federal minimum wage is outrageous, and I think we ought to change it. And I wish I'd gotten the juice together to get it done before I was no longer president. The other thing is this. In the United States, we have an educational system, and it welcomes lots of people, but it does not welcome blind people very well. The programs to serve blind people and to bring blind people into the programs to teach Braille, to teach science, to teach mathematics, those things and to teach gym class, physical exercise, those things don't happen. If what you do is sit in the class and listen, they'll be glad to have you there. But if you're supposed to write something, if you're supposed to read graphs, if you're supposed to get complicated math, if you're supposed to do laboratories, they mostly don't welcome that. So back in about 2004, we started a program to teach science. And we put together a science, we first called it a science camp. It's gone by many names. It's an engineering program. It's a science program. We teach it for a week. Sometimes we've taught it for 2 weeks. Sometimes we've called it Youth Slam. It had many names. We teach people how to do things scientifically, and sometimes we teach engineering. So these days, we get a bunch of kids in and we say to them, we've got some teachers here to show you how to do these things. You can get into one of these programs. You can build robots. You can dissect sharks. You can build boats, and we expect them to build rowboats big enough that you can actually float them and then paddle them around the water. And they're supposed to float and not leak. And they also have to build the paddles. And then we teach them enough science so that they can take the water out of the Chesapeake Bay and make it potable. Quite a task if you get right down to the potability of the water in the Chesapeake Bay. And in a week, they build the boats, we launch the boats, they paddle the boats, they do their scientific experiment in the middle of the water in their boats, and they bring them back, and we haven't lost a single one yet. So that is, we've lost a boat, but not any of the students that were in the boat. And this program of education, what we've done is we've taken these guys and we've run them through this. These are either grade school or high school students, and they've gone back to their schools, and their science programs have changed because a lot of them say, yeah, I can do that, and then they go into the labs. Now, they don't teach Braille in school. They don't know Braille very well, and they keep talking about how it's hard, and they keep talking about how it is that it's a dying system. And they make all sorts of excuses because they don't know it and they don't know how to teach it. And so the kids come out and they don't know how to read. And Braille is a thing that I use every single day to get information in and to write things. And if I'm going to make a speech somewhere, I want the notes under my hand in Braille because that's the way I know how to do it. And if I'm going to cross-examine somebody, I want the list of questions and so on. I need Braille, and so I know the importance of Braille, and I want the school districts to teach it. We are now teaching Braille in about 50 programs throughout the United States every summer. We've got them in 40 states. Sometimes there are multiple programs in one state. But we could not get the school district to do this. We haven't been able to find a thoroughgoing method to systemically change the school district so that the students get a decent education in school. If we can do that, the literacy rate for blind people and the employment rate for blind people will expand enormously. And I was hoping to find a method to do that before I left. Well, I learned that if you are president of something, people pay attention to you. I got to be president of our student division of the National Federation of the Blind and the National Association of Blind Students. And I wrote to the Department of Education. There was a fellow there who said that he worked on helping students get money out of the Department of Education, and I invited him to come to a meeting to tell us all about it. I did not offer to pay his way. I didn't offer to pay him any stipend or anything. I just asked him to come, and lo and behold, here's this official out of the Department of Education, and he came. And I thought, I've got more power than I thought. And I got to be president of the NFB of Indiana, our Indiana affiliate. And I started working in the legislature on bills to help people in Indiana have greater opportunities. And pretty soon people were calling me up to ask me how they could get things in the legislature. And they wanted to invite me to participate in their. And I thought, I have underestimated myself by a long way. In other words, the people in the affiliate said, well, if we can get this law passed, if we could think up a law and get it passed, then we could have opportunities that we didn't have. And here's the kind of law we need, and they made me do it. So it was the members who said, get out there and get started, leading us into the ways that we're supposed to be led and dream up programs for us. And I thought, I have much more power than I ever knew. And if we put this together with people in every state and on the national level, we'll have more power in the Federation than we knew, and we can change our society. So that's what happened.
Okay, now, Mrs. Maurer, I know that, well, we know that behind every great man, there's a phenomenal woman. Now, with that being said, I know that this keeps you really busy. Now, where are you and how do you feel about the parental rights bill?
Of course, I believe I believe we should have rights as parents, and I believe in it thoroughly. You know, we talk to people all the time at the NFB who are parents and who are blind parents whose children either are taken away or children, you know, are given to other members of the family, or just a whole variety of horrific things. And those things just shouldn't happen, and they happen every day. So I think one thing that we can all do, of course, is to help with this, is to make sure that when you hear of blind persons who have these kinds of problems, you get them to the NFB so we can help. But also, sometimes blind people don't realize when something horrible like this happens that there's any recourse for them. So it's our job to educate them too.
Now, Florence, we have 2 children. The first of them is David Maurer. And when he was born, he was a tiny little guy, weighed, I don't know, 3.5 pounds or something. And they said that they were going to have to keep him alive in the hospital a while. And they were going to keep him about a month, they said. And then they said, you know, the characteristics of this child, this baby, are such that he is subject to sudden infant death syndrome. And we don't know whether you can care for him, so we think we'll just have to keep him. Now, I looked this situation over and I thought, you are not responsible for him. He's mine. I am responsible for him, and I'm going to figure this out, and I'm going to take him, and I'm going to make sure that he doesn't get into trouble and that he lives and that I can see that he gets the kinds of things he needs, and I'm not turning him over to anybody else. Now he's 36 at the moment, so he came through. I guess he's 36.
No, he's not 30.
Well, we're going
Oh, he's 34.
34. Well, we're going to have to take a short break on this countdown to see how old your son is. But we'll be right back after the commercial break.
I'm Danny Wayne Beamer, Program Manager of the Elder Blind Program at the Will Center in Terre Haute, Indiana. I introduce the NFB Newsline to seniors in 13 southwestern counties in Indiana. I also utilize the NFB Newsline for my radio station public affairs shows. The NFB Newsline. Experience it today.
Learn more by calling 855-963-6476 or visit nfbnewsline-in.org.
We are the nation's blind, and we read NFB Newsline.
We want to welcome you back to the National Federation of the Blind Newsline Indiana show. We're entertained today by our special guests, Dr. Mark Maurer and his lovely wife, Miss Patricia Maurer. We have several other questions from our audience.
How old are you?
I'm 67.
All right. Have you been blind your whole life?
I have indeed.
How did you start learning to be blind?
Well, I didn't know I was blind.
Yeah.
Nobody told me. I had a tiny bit of remaining vision, and I only learned that I was blind when I was 6. And somebody told me that I needed an operation, and I went to it, and when I came back, I was totally blind. So I learned that I'd been blind all along, but I didn't know. This was annoying. I was bummed about it, as they say. But my mother told me that I had to go outside and play, and I didn't want to, and she dragged me out and made me do it. And I thought, all right, maybe I should run away then. And anyhow, I got through it because she told me to get outside. And since that time, when I was 18 years old, I ran across this program that the National Federation of the Blind was running to teach people about blindness, and I thought, what is there to know? I've been blind a long time. I've been living with it. And I went there and I found out that the story is that blindness can't prevent you from doing what you want. If you think up a way to do it, if you imagine a system to do it that'll let you participate in society, then you can do whatever you want. And it isn't whether you can do it, but whether or not you have the support network and the imagination. And I thought, this is new, and I stuck around to find out, and I've still been learning ever since. You know, I didn't know whether a blind person could drive an automobile. I imagined that a blind person could if you got enough information, but I didn't know because nobody that I knew of had ever done it. I mean, we've all tinkered with it a little, but usually with somebody in the other seat telling you what to do and so forth. But to do it independently with nobody else in the car, mostly we haven't done that. And so we built the car that the blind could drive. Now, do we expect to build a lot more of them? Probably not. The automated driving systems are coming, and we are working with the auto manufacturers and the companies that build the automated systems to make sure that they'll have an interface that we can use. Because I want to have one of those pieces of transportation available to me, and I don't want the idiotic idea that just because I don't have an operator's license means I can't use it. So I was last week working with one of the technology companies that's building the interface over in Israel because I want to bring to those companies the idea that they have an audience bigger than the one they imagine.
Is there another question from the audience?
Dr. Maurer, good evening. How do you, throughout your struggle in your journey, how do you cope with your blindness?
Well, in one sense, I don't deal with it, which is to say I don't think about my blindness. When I wake up in the morning, I know that if I have the energy and the time for it, I'll get a little exercise in. When I get up in the morning, I know that one of the things I'm going to do is cook breakfast. I'm going to make coffee. I'm going to pack my briefcase and put on my necktie. So I don't think about it. Now, I have thought about it, so I have a little bag that has my necktie in it, and it has a Braille card in it, and it tells me what color my necktie is. And I have a color identifier that tells me what color my shirt is. Things like that. So it isn't that I ignore it. I don't, when I need to think about it, I do. But thinking about it is the lesser part of what I do. I plan to put a new corporation together soon to think up some technology that I think we can invent that'll be useful for educational programs. My blindness doesn't enter into that. How to raise enough money, I have to do that, and I have to get the documents together for the corporate. In other words, most of the time my blindness doesn't enter into my thought process. Now, the taxi driver who brought us here today was a guy that I could do without. And one of the things that he wanted to do was grab me in a vice-like grip and sort of steer me this way and that. And I thought, you know, if I were going to be very long in your company, I would talk you out of this, or you and I would get into fisticuffs, because I don't want you to take charge of my person. I'm in charge of me, you are not. So sometimes the blindness gets in the way, but it's not the blindness mostly, it's the misunderstanding about blindness and all of the disadvantages that come from the prejudices about blindness. So those things I have to worry about. But the blindness itself, I've got under control.
No, Dr. Maurer, I have a question for you. As we know, Americans with Disabilities Act is under attack. And once I heard you speak regarding what some businessmen and what some congressmen may be collaborating. And I kind of want you to expound on that speech that you gave. I really like the portion of it that says, not for you. So could you talk about that a little bit?
Well, okay, so there's a bill in the Congress that says that you cannot, well, the Americans with Disabilities Act was adopted in 1990. It became effective, most of it, in 1992. And that bill says that if you have a disability, then you're welcome to places of public accommodation. And that means things like hotels and theaters and like that. Now, there is a bill in the Congress that says that you cannot bring a complaint against an operator of a public accommodation unless you've given them advance warning of 120 days, and then they get 120 days to fix up whatever was wrong. So if you go there and they say, you can't come in here because you're blind, which some people have said to me over the years, then you notify them that they violated the law, and you tell them which section of the law they violated, and they say that they'll let you in next time and there's been no violation of the law. In other words, ignorance of the law is a perfect excuse. In most cases, ignorance of the law is no excuse. Well, in this case, it is. That bill has passed the House. It has not passed the Senate, and there has been a letter written by 43 members of the Senate saying that they're against this bill, and that probably is enough members of the Senate so that a vote to clear the debate on the Senate floor can't happen. I hope that's true, because this cuts the opportunity for people with disabilities to complain about discrimination. They say, well, you know, we don't really know what we're supposed to do. The law has been there since 1990. The regulations have been there just almost as long. There's been a a lot written about it. And if you want to know what you're supposed to do, just call up and ask us. We know. And so we'll tell you. And then so I put all of this together in a thought process and wrote a speech about it. And what I said then, maybe this is what you're after, I don't know. What I said then was, a lot of the hotel operators don't want blind people to come. I said, isn't our money as good as other people's money? Yes. And the answer to the question is no, it isn't. Because, you know, you don't fit in. They don't want you there because you don't fit in. Now, is this true of all hotel operators? Of course not. Here we are in this hotel, and we're being welcomed, and our money is just fine here. And not only that, but we were welcomed with warmth at the front desk. I'm not saying all hotel operators are like that, but the Asian Hotel Operators Organization has decided that they don't want to have to worry about what to do with disabled people because they think it's an extra burden upon them, and they don't want us to show up. So it doesn't matter whether we have money, they don't want us to come at all. That's my opinion of their opinion. People with disabilities are often noticeably different from people without disabilities. And that means you have to do something different to welcome them to your place. It isn't hard to do, but you have to do it. All right, so I was in Israel the other day, and I got into this hotel, and there's no Braille anywhere. Well, it's hard to operate an elevator with no Braille. It's hard to tell which number goes where, and when you get to the floor and you get out on the floor, it's hard to figure out whether you got on the right floor. And even if you get on the right floor, when you go to the hotel room, it's hard to identify that this is the one you had in mind. Of course, you could just stick your key in every door and up and down the hall, but that takes a long time, and besides, people might think you're breaking in, and they might rush out and hit you in the head or something. All of this is a disadvantage. So having the Braille on the hotel doors is really nice. And it's not just a convenience for me, it's a convenience for other people because it means I'm less trouble for the hotel operators. Otherwise, I have to go down to the front desk if I can figure out where it is and get the right button on the elevator. And if I can't do that, I just bang on hotel doors till I find somebody to ask, you know, and that annoys the customers. In other words, it's really good for the hotel to have the Braille on the doors because that way I can use the place without having to disrupt the system. So they ought to want to do it. Do they want to do it? Some do. Some don't.
Well, some do and some don't. My producer's telling me we have to take a break. So we're going to do that, and we'll be right back.
The National Federation of the Blind knows that blindness is not the characteristic that defines you or your future. Every day we raise the expectations of blind people because low expectations create obstacles between blind people and our dreams. You can live the life you want. Blindness is not what holds you back.
I trust that you learned about the National Federation of the Blind, and I trust that it has invigorated you and inspired you so that you can go out and help bridge gaps of visible differences. So we're going to have closing remarks by Dr. Mark Maurer.
Thank you for inviting me onto the program. I want to say this. The National Federation of the Blind has a great many exciting people in it. They're fun to be with. They have great ideas. We have lots of resources, lots of dreams. We can build things together. If you find a place in your family, your community, where there are blind people who need assistance, who'd like to have some opportunities they don't, who want to learn new things, be sure to let us know. Our president here is Ron Brown. He is a great guy. I've known him for, 40 years or so. It is a wonderful organization to be with. If you want help, come ask.
We'll take this here, and we'll see you all next week. God bless.
The National Federation of the Blind, Newsline, Indiana. For more information, go to nfb-in.org or call 855-963-6476. That's 855-963-6476.